Beat RPGs and conquer your backlog the SuperDerek Way. That's what this video is about, guys. Over the last 8 years, I have finished over 100 RPGs and reviewed them all. And I mean, that's a pretty good clip, you know, about 10 RPGs a year, give or take. It might surprise you to learn that this is not my full-time job. I do have a full-time job. I do have a wife and some semblance, I don't know anymore, but a semblance of a social life. Maintaining a good clip through these RPGs can sometimes be pretty difficult. So today I want to talk a little bit about how I do this. Now, first, a little bit about what this video is. This video is for people who have a hard time making their way through their backlog. People who keep replaying the same games instead of crossing new games off the bucket list. People who stall at the end of RPGs and can't bite the bullet and actually finish a game. People who are burned out or on the edge of burning out. People who are scrapped for time and really just don't think they have time anymore to even play RPGs. People who are overwhelmed with their backlog. People who are the way that I was just a few years ago. This is meant to be helpful advice, to be taken with the fact that everybody's life situation is different and not everything is going to work for everybody. And everybody has different goals, right? So keep all of that in mind. But this video is not going to be telling you that the way you play RPGs is wrong. And this is not meant for people who are already making good progress through their backlog. But if that's you, stick around because I want your thoughts on this too. I am, after all, just a sample size of one person. I know what works for me, and that's what I'm going to be sharing today, but I want to know what works for you too. Before we get started, do be sure to get subscribed because I'm SuperDerek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for people who love RPGs, and this is my guide on how to beat RPGs and conquer your backlog. The first thing I would probably recommend that you do is to make a plan. And luckily, I'm going to give you a plan here, and I want you to customize this plan and make it your own plan. You've all heard the phrase that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That is true for all things, whether you're planning a party or planning to get a promotion at work, or you're planning to get through your backlog. It's good to have a plan and to try to stick to that, you know. Start just with a small list of about 10 games or so that you want to finish pretty soon. You don't want to have too many games on this list because this is going to be basically the list of games that you initially start selecting from as you play through your games. But if you have too long of a list, you're going to paralyze yourself with choices. So get that list narrowed down to just 10 or so. It's going to be easy to select through. 10 might even be too many. You might even want to start with just like 5 games. The top 5 that you really just want to mark off that bucket list. Prioritize this list a little bit. We're going to compose it in a way to help you avoid getting burnt out. We'll talk about a strategy for how to compose that list here in a little bit. We're going to figure out how long they take to beat. You can find that information on howlongtobeat.com. What kind of game they are, you know, what the general feel of the game. You can watch a couple of spoiler-free reviews to kind of get a gist of like the stakes involved and the setting and the battle system. You know, watch through some of my reviews. Those are usually pretty spoiler-free, relatively speaking, until you start getting into the sequels, and then I might talk about spoilers for the originals. But generally speaking, you can find those to kind of get a feel for what to expect, and that'll help you kind of prioritize your games as you make your way through this list. Then the next thing you're going to want to do, and this is going to sound weird, is you're going to need to set up some sort of schedule. And it doesn't have to be a rigid schedule. This is something where you are just going to set aside time for yourself to enjoy RPGs. And I know a lot of people out there are like, oh, my wife is not going to be happy about that. Listen, guys and gals, you got to take care of yourself. Listen, real talk. You got to take care of yourself. You know, mental health is extremely important, and not all of that time is going to be around your significant other or your family. You got to have time for yourself, and this can be your own personal time. It doesn't necessarily have to be strict. It's not even daily. This is just time that you set aside for yourself, and if something comes up, that's fine. It can set aside. It's not set in stone. Get into the rhythm, the pattern of having this time that you set aside for yourself. And more often, as long as you have it in your mind that this is the time that I use to play these games and get my way through them, the more often than not, you're going to start being able to actually fit that in. And while around the time of schedules, schedule yourself some time with your family too. This has been especially important for me and my wife, Amy, because we both work full-time jobs. I have a YouTube channel and I stream 3 times a week on Twitch, sometimes more than that. So I have a stream schedule, and I have a schedule of time that I spend with Amy as well. My wife and I also really get each other. We're both kind of introverts, so we also need time away from each other as well as time with each other. And that's not like this is not the only time I spend with Amy or anything. This is just time that I set aside specifically for her. She also really appreciates that she also gets to have that time specifically designated for me. It's one of those things where time is like extra money in a budget, right? Where does that extra money in a budget go? It disappears. And that's the way that it is with time too. If it's not budgeted, if you don't budget your time, if you're not scheduling things, that time disappears. It disappears into watching videos on YouTube. It disappears into scrolling through Twitter and other social media and watching streamers on Twitch. Twitch is a little bit different because I feel like that's the sort of content you can multitask. Like you could watch a streamer playing RPGs, for instance, and then be playing RPGs as well. And in fact, that's what a lot of people do during my streams. You know, they'll be playing maybe not even the same game, but they'll be grinding and they'll have something to listen to in the background and I'll have some discussions going on. That's a really great way to sort of multitask. Enjoy two things that you like at the same time. You also don't have to schedule yourself a whole lot of time. It doesn't take up an entire day. I mean, sure, back in the day, that's what we used to do. We would binge our games, right? But that's not really feasible for a lot of us anymore. Instead, you only maybe get a few hours here, a few hours there, a couple of hours a day, a few times a week, and that time adds up. As you progress through the weeks, you'll find that you're spending dozens of hours on finishing these RPGs and you're making a good clip. It's all about setting aside the time so that it doesn't disappear into social media, really. Because that just kind of consumes everything at this point. Schedule yourself time to do the things you want to do or you'll never get around to them. The next thing that I would recommend is to really just focus on playing a single game at a time. And that might be a bit of a controversial thing. I know a lot of people like to juggle their games. I personally find that it works best for me to play a single game at a time because it kind of keeps the story fresh in your mind and it prevents you from wasting time playing these RPGs, trying to remember, what was I doing again? Last time I played this 2 weeks ago, you know, and it really keeps you on track. It keeps you on the list. If you had two 40-hour RPGs that you're playing through, kind of alternating your way through at about 10 hours per week, it'll take you 2 months to finish either one of those games, as opposed to just a single month to finish one of them. I mean, I realize that some people have different life situations where they might only get a couple of hours a week, but even if you only have a couple of hours per week to actually play these games, it's best to still stick with just one RPG because then you'll at least have one game finished every few months instead of every year or two. And this way you can at least have one RPG, maybe one new RPG every year that you're marking off the bucket list, right? And then finish the game. I used to have this issue where I would play through a game up until like the very final moments or the final act, there's a climax, and I would just kind of get, I don't know, almost turned off. And I don't know what it was exactly that did it. What I did find though is that when I started playing through these games to review them and I gave myself the goal of completing them for reviewing them, suddenly I felt more compelled, if not by the rewards that the game offered, I was compelled by the rewards that I would offer myself by having that feeling of completing it and being able to work on a project that I wanted to do. So give yourself some sort of completion goal on these games and actually mark them off the list maybe, put it on a completed shelf, or if you really like the game, you know, maybe treat yourself to a figure from the game and put it up on a shelf, you know, with nothing but the figures of the games that you've completed and really enjoyed. Something to kind of just congratulate yourself and of course to reward yourself by playing a different game that you've really been looking forward to doing. If you're only playing one game at a time and you're scheduling yourself and you're sticking to it, you will eventually finish that game. I think that once you start getting into the habit, you'll start defeating that habit of getting into that last hour or two of the game and leaving it. I've been there a long time. I've done it a lot. And now I don't struggle with that anymore because I'm just so used to it. I still don't fully understand what it was that kept me from completing games before, but now that I've forced myself to complete games more often, it just happens more naturally. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to avoid burnout by composing that list of games that we talked about before. At least at first, as you're getting into this, stagger the subgenres of RPGs that you're playing, right? If you're like me and you just want to play RPGs, and that's what I do. I don't know if anybody else does this, but because I only play RPGs, I stagger my subgenres. I'll play an action RPG, and then I'll play a turn-based RPG. Try alternating your way through series. Don't do just like a whole series marathon. That's something that I learned back when I was playing my way through the Kingdom Hearts series, is I eventually did get burned out. I didn't think I could get burned out. I'm pretty resilient to that sort of thing, but a lot of my viewers, for instance, were burnt out by watching the content, let alone playing it. But I found that by alternating my way through a series, like I've been doing with the Trails in the Sky series or Trails the Crossbow series, I've found that not only are people sticking with me in my streams longer, but I'm also just enjoying it more because it gives me also more time to digest the games in between each iteration and kind of really process. And also one of the other benefits is that it allows the series to last longer in your memory and to stay present in your memory. I feel like the binge model of just binging your way through an entire series is nice, but I feel like it affects my absorption rate, I guess. It feels like the games are way shorter than when I play them staggered out. And I really appreciate being able to take my time through the games and really appreciate them. Also, I would recommend alternating between playing short games and really long games. Alternate your settings, sometimes play one that takes place in outer space, play some that take place in a fantasy setting or a real world setting. Differentiate between, high stakes games where the whole world's gonna end and low stakes things where you're just crafting potions. Switch it up with difficulty levels. Don't just play a whole bunch of super hard or super easy RPGs. Mix them in together, Play Shin Megami Tensei games at one point and then switch over and play some Atelier games, right? Mix in some new games and some old games. Mix in some indie RPGs and some AAA RPGs. Don't just play the same subgenre all the time, because that's where the burnout happens. People ask me a lot, how do I not get burned out by playing RPGs? I feel like RPGs have a lot more variation to them than you probably would normally expect. There are so many ways that you can add variety to your RPG list. And just when you're composing that list, keep in mind, I just played one that took place in a medieval fantasy setting that had turn-based combat. Maybe I should throw in something a little bit different next. But also above all is don't be beholden to this list. This is a list of suggestions, right? Follow your gut. If you keep wanting to play a game that's not on your list, treat yourself for finishing a game that's on your list by playing that game that's not on your list, right? And then finally, stop the replay cycle. Stop just replaying the same games that you already love and have already finished. Don't play Chrono Trigger again for the 17th time like I did. Do something that provides you with some more closure, maybe. Mark it off of a list, right? Put the game up on the completed shelf. Maybe write a journal entry about your thoughts on the game, or make a YouTube video documenting your thoughts on the game. That's what I did, and it worked for me. Stick to the list as best as you can, but if you still really just want to replay a game again, add it to the list, but give it a low priority. And then eventually, when you've beaten a new game that you've never finished before, treat yourself for doing that by playing the game that you've already played a few dozen times before. It's fine. Games are fun, and have fun playing your way through them. I'm just trying to give you a strategy to help you enjoy more of them. Slow and steady, you'll make your way through the games and keep yourself flexible. These are the strategies that I've adopted over the last 8 years that have helped me avoid burnout and make my way through over 100 RPGs in 8 years. It's not the fastest clip, but again, I got a full-time job, I got a wife, I got a life. Sometimes things take a back seat, but that doesn't mean that they have to go away entirely. You can play RPGs, you can beat them. I believe in you. And if you've overcome these challenges, let us know in the comments down below how you've managed to overcome them, or if you have some other ailment that afflicts you and is keeping you from finishing the games that you want to. Leave a comment down below and we can try to help you out with that as well. So thanks for hanging out, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great